Out today is a really interesting book, which I suggest everyone grabs a copy of. Get it from your favourite book provider. Might Bite is the title of a book, and we've got the author, Mr. Patrick Foster, joining us. Whereabouts are you, Patrick, this morning?
I'm in Witney, in Oxfordshire, which is where home is these days. So thanks very much for having me on.
That's David Cameron country, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. That's definitely what it's famous for. So yeah.
So Might Bite, just tell us about the title first of all.
Yeah, the title, as you'll find out if you read the book, that was sort of not quite the last bet I ever placed, but certainly almost. And the horse was in the Cheltenham Gold Cup, and that was the point where it sort of gambling had become a question of sort of make or break, life or death, if you like. I put a very significant amount of money on that horse, and it came second by a length, and my world came crashing down at that point. And when I was thinking about the title of the book, there was a kind of play on words there as well, in that certainly for some people gambling can bite you very hard, as it did me.
We'll go through the backstory in a moment, but with the benefit of hindsight now, do you think it's a good thing that it did lose?
Yeah, absolutely. I say to people when I talk about it now, it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Obviously at the time it didn't feel like it, but yeah, I think there's no doubt that if it had won, the kind of vicious spiral that I'd got myself into would only have continued. And I think I always say to people, as sinister as it sounds, if that horse had won, I'd probably now be in prison or dead. And I certainly don't want either of those things.
So let's wind it back to the start and your emergence as a promising cricketer in the early days. So just give us and our listeners a little bit of a story of your background. Yeah,
so when I was younger, growing up, like a lot of people, I had one ambition in life, and that was to be a professional sportsman. I played all different sports. I then was lucky. I went to one of the top independent boarding schools. I got a scholarship there, and cricket started to be or emerge as the kind of sport that I had the most ability in, fortunately. And as a youngster, things went really well. I was sort of very high achieving. I got pulled out of school cricket, given a place on the Northants academy, was playing second team cricket whilst at school. And at that point in my life, I thought, you know what, this is going to be all right. I'm going to be rich, famous, get paid to do what I love, and be a cricketer for the rest of my life. I think there was, looking back, there's certainly an element of naivety there, because even when you're in that situation, there's an awful long way to go. And I think a lot of young people, and I was probably one of those, you think you've probably made it before you perhaps have. And I always knew in the back of my mind, there were a lot of other guys that were probably more naturally talented, bowled quicker, hit it harder, but I worked hard. I worked damn hard and made the most of my ability. So yeah, certainly when I was at school and up until the point I went to university, that was all I wanted to do.
And then you moved into the city when sport sort of came to an end. Insurance broking, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I started in January 2010, working in the city for an insurance broker, having finished at university and my race sort of being run cricket-wise.
Sport and the city sort of seem to go hand in hand. I've been in the city for 37 years, amazingly, still not been found out. And when I first started, there were a lot of sport wasn't quite as professional as it is now, particularly rugby. A lot of senior rugby players could be found in the square mile. Peter Winterbottom, Mickey Skinner, Eric Peters, to name two or three there. And it seemed to me at that time, if you had a sportsman ethic, it seemed to go hand in hand with how to survive or prosper in the city, that same competitive nature, that edge. Dare I say, the gambling element as well, because the city, as a lot of people know, is just basically one big casino, and you have to have that. I mean, the polite word for it is investment, but it's still gambling, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you do see and find a lot of sportsmen and women in that field when sports either come to an end early or after careers, and people have made great successes of it for the reasons you've just said. But certainly for me, when I went into the city, I kind of followed the crowd there. I never thought I'd do it, but it seemed the right thing to do. But what was strange when I went into the city was I then became kind of motivated by money, because it surrounded me, and that's all that became important. I almost forgot about everything else, and it was about money. And then, of course, you add that, or put that with the fact that I was now gambling a lot more and pretty heavily. It was a match made in heaven or hell, depending on which way you look at it.
It's a good point, because
did you gamble before you? Sorry, Darren. He'll edit this bit out. He'll edit that little bit out. Don't worry. So did you gamble before you started in the city, or just dabbling a little bit when you were playing or at uni?
Yeah, I didn't. It was when I went to uni that I started. I'd never really done it before that. It wasn't something that my family did, friends. It was at uni that I started, and I think that was because I had the money to do it, because I had a generous mum and dad, a student loan, and was getting paid to play cricket. So I thought to myself, I can do what I want with my money, and if I lose a bit, it doesn't matter. I also had a lot of time on my hands, as you know, when you're at uni. If you're not in the library studying, which you didn't have to do as much as people think, if I wasn't in the gym or in the nets practicing, I was often bored, and that's why I gambled. So I was doing it. I did it with my mates. There was a fair bit of transparency around it, but I guess the whole time I gambled, what was weird is there was always this element of secrecy, because I always did it with my mates, but I always did it a bit more than I was letting on. And there was always parts of it that I kept secret. But when I went into the city, that's when it really accelerated, because it was everywhere. And it was also part of culture very much. It's what people did, because either you did it through your work or you did it alongside work, or both.
Quite a lot of people dabble with gambling. It's almost like it's a nationally accepted addiction. And the worst thing that can happen if you are just dabbling with it is that you get a big win, because then you think, oh, it's easy, and then you think that's going to happen every time. But as I'm sure you'll testify, all that ends up happening is you just chase bigger and bigger losses.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not stupid. I recognize that a lot of people do it, enjoy it, do it for fun, can afford to lose the money that they do or the time. But for some people, it becomes a problem, like it did for me. And winning and having a big win, as I did at the end of 2010, did change everything, because at that point I then thought I was invincible. I thought it was going to happen every time. If it didn't, well, it will happen again at some point, and in the short term it's probably money I don't need right now. But actually the bit I never appreciated was that was the point where it became like a drug for me, because if I didn't win that amount of money, it didn't give me the same sort of rush, buzz, dopamine hit. And so I went from putting sort of reasonable size bets on to putting huge bets on, because I was trying to win that amount of money every time I had a bet. And most people who end up having an addiction to gambling at some point have a big win because of that. Because actually, if you never win, you're never going to continue to do it.
When you got to the point of your road to Damascus moment, how hard was it? It's like, you talk people that are in any kind of addiction, whether it's drinking, smoking, whatever. Was it easy to just stop and turn your life around?
No. I think the biggest thing for me was admitting that I had a problem. I knew I had a problem. It was admitting that I had a problem, and almost realizing that I can't deal with this myself, because I'd always been so proud. I always thought I could sort of be a hero and deal with the problem myself. But actually, that was the biggest moment for me. And once I did that, it then became a lot easier. People think, oh, well, you've done it. All you got to do is say you got a problem and the problem's fixed. I wanted a quick fix. There isn't a quick fix. But as soon as you do that, your life can move forward. And for me, that was kind of obviously a watershed moment.
It worries me that gambling is now so prevalent and so normalised. Wasn't that long ago that the only time you ever talked with anyone about betting was when the National came on, and you might do an office sweepstake, or it might be the one time a year that anyone walked into a betting shop. But now, I mean, people don't seem to realise things like the lottery, all of these bingo things, and the march of the online ease of betting. I think you mentioned in your book about the mobile phone is almost manna from heaven to these gambling companies, the bookmakers and those that are vulnerable to gambling.
Yeah, I think it is now so normalized in society, both through kind of advertising. When I first started to do it, there were a number of people that did it, but it wasn't the norm. And one of the motivations for writing my book was to make people kind of appreciate that when it is so normalized, when everybody does it, it shouldn't carry the stigma that it still does for so many people. It's still a bit of a dirty word. And yet people are doing it. People don't talk about it. People are much more comfortable about talking about their relationship with other addictive substances and behaviors, but not gambling, which doesn't make any sense to me at all. And obviously the advent of online gambling, that's changed everything, because it became a 24/7 365-day habit for me, because I could do it anytime, any place, and I really did. And that's the problem for a lot of people, is when it does become a problem, we become addicted to it, you can't get away from it, because you can do it anytime. It lives in your pocket, and the temptation is just there all the time. And I found that really hard.
Darren and I are old enough to remember when Formula One cars were either John Player Special or Marlboro branded, and Liverpool's sponsor used to be Carlsberg, and you don't see any of that anymore. But there's a lot of, certainly Premier League football teams, that are sponsored by betting companies. So I would imagine, I don't know whether you can answer this, but I would imagine that there will be a campaign and a shift to removing that kind of advertising, because it's going to be very apparent that there's a different health focus on that side of things. It's not just the physical health of smoking and drinking. Yeah,
absolutely, spot on. And I think the thing with advertising when it comes to gambling is actually it's kind of the volume of it and the saturation. It's just everywhere. It's relentless, and it's the exposure that young people are getting to it as well, which I sort of don't agree with, and the predatory nature of some of the gambling, advertising, the fact that it's trying to hook you in by offering you free bets, free offers. They try and shift you from betting on sport and football to casino games all the time. So it's definitely, something's got to be done. There's the Gambling Act review process going on at the moment, so it's obviously a very hot topic, and I think we will see some changes and some real positive changes, and I think a lot of those will focus on advertising and sponsorship, but also there needs to be a lot more regulation, and one of the issues is that until somebody tells the companies that they have to do it, and they all have to do it, they won't, because until you're told you really do have to, it's up to you, isn't it?
Yeah, I saw an advert over the weekend for an unnamed betting company who were boasting, and their allure was that they'd already given away £10 million in prizes. This is on the TV, primetime TV. And my first thought was, well, if you've given away 10 million in prizes, how much have you made as a company to be able to give away 10 million?
Yeah, exactly.
Hundreds and hundreds of millions.
Yeah, massively. And I think that's one of the things I talk about in my book, is around I was member of these VIP schemes, which luckily I think are a thing of the past. They're being phased out very quickly, rightly so. But it was the only industry in the world that you get rewarded for kind of being the biggest loser. And I was spending huge sums of money with these companies. And when I was younger, I was getting rewarded with tickets to this, that, and the other. And of course, that makes you feel big. But actually, I now know. But also, free bets are a big thing. I got over £100,000 worth of free bets. Anyone who needs a free bet doesn't have enough money to gamble with, so that in itself is a problem. So I do think we'll see some positive changes, but what can't happen is they can't, as they've probably historically done, take advantage of vulnerable people, and they need to do more to protect those individuals that are in the situation that I was.
So a lot of noise from the NHS at the moment, as well as reading in the press over the weekend about funding for gambling addiction. And I think they've got government pressure to basically treat gambling in the same way as tobacco, as Webby was talking about, in terms of aligning them. But also, what's probably more interesting is the fact that the NHS gambling clinics are funded by bookmakers and gambling companies, and they're trying to cut that umbilical cord as well. Is it a worry that they're potentially down the road might be less help for those that are suffering from gambling addiction?
Yeah, it's a huge concern, because I think statistically, and I hope I'm right in saying this, I think less than 10% of people that have got a gambling problem get the help that they need, and that's not good. So more needs to be done, more help needs to be available. I still think part of that is because people don't do anything about it because of the stigma attached. So yeah, it's the treatment side of things is really worrying, because it's not accessible enough. For me, I was incredibly fortunate when it came to actually getting the professional support that I need, because I went through private treatment, which my parents were able to help, but also had the support of the Professional Cricketers Trust. So I was lucky, but there are a lot of people that can't access that or can't afford it because, of course, you've got no money. And so the treatment side of things is huge, and there's a lot of more mental health support and provision becoming available, which is great. And this is obviously a mental health issue, but it needs to be treated as a kind of public health issue for it to get any better.
Coming back to your book, how easy was it to write a book? I mean, it's one thing writing an article or sitting with a couple of amateurs like us and talking about the subject. To put together a full-blown book, was that something you found easy, challenging, or how did you find it?
I think a combination of the two. I wrote it during the first lockdown, and that was partly because I knew I had to find some things to fill my time. In terms of the process, having the kind of addictive, compulsive personality that I did, it happened a lot quicker than I expected it to, in the sense that I got a lot down on paper very quickly. I found the whole process quite cathartic, because there are a lot of things that I found easier to write than to say, some of the really tough things. But where it was tough is it kind of brought it all back up. But also, when you speak for 20 minutes on the subject, you can say what you want. When you write 90,000 words, you got to dig really deep, and you've got to put everything down. And some things I found really difficult to kind of, people were very aware of the overview of my story, but some of the depths and some of the omissions that I've gone to in the book, it was tough at times, but hopefully worth it.
No, absolutely. One of the things you talked about in your story was that one of the personal costs on you of the gambling, and away from the financial side, was the fact that being someone who was so enthusiastic about sport and exercise, that dwindled as your gambling addiction got worse, and you put on weight and you stopped playing sport and stopped doing exercise. You look to be in fairly decent shape now from the bits I can see on this picture. Are you back playing sport? Are you doing anything physical?
Yeah,
Playing cricket at all?
Well, I think, yeah, absolutely. That was one of the things that I look back on with great sadness, is that for a long time I didn't. As somebody, as you say, who loved team sport, who loved doing exercise, I just didn't do it because gambling was almost giving me that competitive fix, and it's what I'd rather have been doing, which now I can't quite believe. So yeah, absolutely, my addictive personality definitely manifests itself in all sorts of weird and wonderful ways, and for some reason it's now turned to running, which I've become totally obsessed with, but I see it as a kind of almost like a positive addiction. But I got to be really careful, because you also realize that kind of too much of anything's not good for you. So yeah, doing that. So I've got fit again, or fitter, lost a bit of much needed weight, and yeah, playing sport again as well. Obsessive golfer, and also playing cricket again. So I didn't play. My relationship with cricket was a very strange one for a long time. It's very monetary driven. It just wasn't good. I didn't really play during the kind of COVID year, and I had a break from it, and then decided to go back to my sort of home club, which is Horsepath Cricket Club in the Home Counties League, because I left there in horrible circumstances in 2017, and they'd been very good to me. So part of it was I wanted to go back to kind of repay them for their support. Played last year and actually really enjoyed it. Loved everything about it, and so I've decided to, yeah, I'm going to carry on playing. I think you're a long time retired, and I've taken on the captaincy this year, which is, I think, a brave decision by them, but I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, it's an important part of my recovery, because it gives me that competitive fix as well, which doesn't go away, and you've got to find other ways to kind of channel that.
So you say I mean, and I see obviously firsthand your addiction to running now, through the Facebook group that we're both in. You're far more active than I am. How many Ks did you clock up last year?
I think about 3,500 last year. And then I've been doing a challenge this month for Red January, which is a great initiative. So I set myself a challenge to run 500 kilometers this month. So I managed to do that, which is great. But running for me now, people say, oh, it's for this reason or that. It's very individual why you do it. But for me, what I love about it is it provides me with almost a kind of, during rehab, they talked a lot about kind of mindfulness and meditation, and that comes in all sorts of sort of forms and guises. But for me, running is the thing that I go out, and when I'm doing it, I don't think about as much as I normally do. I love being outside. I know it's good for my physical and mental health, so it serves more than just one purpose. But yeah, it's got to the point where it's a bit obsessive, and as I say, I think I got to think about now, whilst it's great for my mental health, I got to think about my physical health, because I'm not getting any younger, and it will start to take its toll on knees and ankles, I think.
You're a mere pup compared to me and Webby. I'll give you a clue. So just before we let you go, Patrick, shameless plug for the book. So Might Bite is out now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, obviously, can't believe it's got to this point. It's nearly 2 years on from when I wrote the first word. I've been very lucky, because Will McPherson, who's a cricket journalist and a great friend, he has co-written the book for me, because in its original form I don't think it would have got published, and he's done a brilliant job. So I've said that the reason I've done it is to try and help other people, not just understand what it's like, but also just be more aware of people around them. And so yeah, hopefully people will read it. I think they'll enjoy it in different ways. It's not an easy read at times, but yeah, it's a proud moment, and it feels very strange to describe myself as an author. But yeah, I never thought it'd happen. Probably not the book I ever wanted to release, but yeah, proud we got this far.
It's a great achievement, and must have taken a hell of a lot of guts to do it. So many congratulations from us, and we're really pleased that you took the time to join us on the show.
Thanks very much for having me, and keep up the great work. I love listening. So yeah, thanks guys.